Hello and welcome to our ImpactWayv Shortwave Lasting Impact podcast. I'm Karen Talamelli, and my guest today is Erden Eruç. Erden is a world-renowned adventurer and explorer, and today Erden is here to speak about life at sea, a typical day on the ocean. Welcome, Erden.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So tell us, what is your typical day like on
Okay, I am
on the ocean
actually
seas here?
reflecting right now as we pause for a moment, thinking about my time at sea. 1,168 days of my life was spent on a rowboat, rowing on the oceans throughout my life. 1,084 of those were alone. My rowboat is purpose-built, suitable for the oceans. It has a cabin in the back. It's 24 feet long, and the deck is covered, so if water splashes in, a wave breaks over my boat, it doesn't sink the boat. It just empties off the scuppers on the side and rises back up. It's designed to remain upright. So this rowboat has been my home for 1,084 days of my life. The deck is covered and has a rowing sliding seat in the middle, and I use long sweep shaft oars that are thick shafts that are going to take the conditions on the water just fine. The ocean can throw big waves toward me, and I cannot have them break on me. As you can see on this rowboat, I have a post in the front that has a navigation light on it that makes me visible at night to surrounding vessels. And that post actually is also an active radar transponder. It signals to other vessels my location, puts me on their radar screen, and on it you see a little yellow device. That's my tracking device that's signaling my location to everyone. So on my website erdeneruç.com, there's a tracking page, and you can see where I am all the time. On this page also you see on this image also you see a yellow grab bag on the port side, on the left side of the bow, and that's my emergency grab bag if I were to transition to a life raft. On the right you see a green bucket, and that's my toilet. So I address my needs, call of the nature, using a bucket or a bottle, depending. The cabin is in the back of the boat, and it feels like a two-person tent, and that's where all my electronics are located, and that's the dry area where I spend my time sleeping at night. When I'm sleeping in heavy weather, I can tie myself down on the mattress. I have 4-point tie down that keeps me from being thrown at the ceiling, and if the boat rolls, in the off chance that a big wave breaks next to my boat, then I wouldn't be thrown at the ceiling. If I actually changed places and if I were thrown at the ceiling, I would be a shifted ballast, and that would keep the boat from righting itself. So it's critical that I take into account those kinds of odd scenarios. And the boat has a desalination unit that runs from my 12-volt electrical system that's powered by two 100 amp hour batteries. So I have a total of 200 amp hour storage capacity that runs this unit. It can make up to 2 gallons an hour, and I use that to reconstitute my food, freeze-dried food. I use that to drink. I use that to rinse my skin and my clothing, because salt is an irritant and it desiccates the skin, and that creates all sorts of problems. So rinsing the salt off my clothes and skin is critical as part of my maintenance. When I face storms, I end up either rowing in these heavy seas, watching every wave arrive. I may choose to deploy a para anchor from the bow and have the rowboat face the waves, and that keeps it from rolling. So underfoot, you see all sorts of line piled, and I am pulling a yellow para anchor in. This is just before I start rowing again. A storm can be threatening. As long as the waves arrive from a given direction as a series of waves, the boat behaves well. If I have a low pressure system that is circulating around me, though, the waves will change direction over time. And then you have cross seas that creates boxing seas, up and down motion more than linear travel for the waves. And that becomes threatening and can create breaking waves.
In that case, Erden, do you just wait it out until that storm passes?
Depends on the conditions.
Mm-hmm.
So if the seas are doing what I want and it's going in the direction that I do want, it may be safer that I do get out and row. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, if it is breaking seas and it creates potential for the boat being pushed around, it can break things. It can break my oars. It can break my oar locks. It can damage the boat. What I have done in the past is just tie the oars as you see here, just pull everything in and just let the boat either run or stay on para anchor. It really depends on the conditions. I think the best part of spending time on the water is enjoying the company of creatures out there that come to visit my boat. This red-footed booby came to land on my oars that were tied as I was in the cabin. You can see the poop at the top of the screen where it was sitting before. It was trying to. The first thing that they do when they land is to poop, and then they start preening themselves. Everything gets preened by the flexible neck and the beak. They have to go pick every annoying hair that they have and help it break through the skin, sometimes those budding hairs and such. There's one area in their neck, though, that requires their foot to scratch and sort. So to do that, it has to stand on one foot and lift the other. Of course, with the moving boat, each time this creature tried to lift his right foot, and scratch its neck, it just failed. It had to put the foot back down to stay in balance. So I reached and helped it and sort of fluffed its feathers on its neck and seemed to enjoy that. It got closer to me and wanted more of it. It was behaving like a little cat, turning its head and okay, scratch here, scratch there. And then eventually it flew around and came to the top of my cabin and settled there. And that way I could scratch its chest and neck and use both hands. And it ended up staying with me for 5 days and became my buddy. It would spend time when it landed in odd places. I would pick it up and put it toward the center of the boat and lower in the boat where side-to-side movement would not be as aggressive. So that way it could take a break. It would stick its head between its wings and take a nap as I moved back and forth over its head with my oars. So I get these kinds of cute encounters that really make it worthwhile. And I spend a good 11 hours or so of my time on the water rowing. And the rest of the time, I need to get my 8 hours of sleep every day. And there's a whole lot of maintenance going on, rinsing, washing, preparing food, consuming, doing maintenance, cleaning. That's part of the daily routine. One of the things that I absolutely pay attention to, of course, is to capture all of my trash and bring it to shore. So all of my food is packaged in these pouches and it's the necessary evil sometimes. They all are plastic pouches, sealed forever. They will last forever. That's why I take freeze-dried foods. They last forever on the ocean. The longest time I was on the ocean without getting uh, to shore or seeing direct help from humanity was 312 days on the Pacific Ocean in 2007-2008 season. My
Oh my.
most recent crossing across the Pacific was from Crescent City to Hawaii in 80 days, and then Hawaii to Guam in 128, and another 30 days to Legazpi. And this image shows you the trash that I collected from Crescent City to Hawaii. 80 days worth of plastic trash is inside that one black bag that I delivered to Hawaii for proper disposal. I do see trash in the water as I row, and but it's such a vast expanse of water that they are far and few in between. I do see more trash as I get near shore. So I was seeing a styrofoam cup or a bottle every other day or so, maybe stretched to once a week as I rode between uh, Hawaii and Guam. From Guam to Philippines, as I approached Philippines, I started seeing it every day, and then I started seeing it pretty much every hour. So the currents and the winds drive all of this plastic into those waters, and then the islets, all the island chain
Mhm.
of Philippines, you may want to call it archipelago of the Philippine Islands, create the big barrier, and the currents have to go like a sieve between those islands. And as they do, they basically discard all this plastic on the Philippine shores. And so the concentration really goes up as I approach the western shores of the Pacific. That's what I observed as I was doing this most recent crossing. So the crossing was from Crescent City in the top right corner all the way to Legazpi in the Philippines. And that became the first crossing of the Pacific Ocean by human power in North America and Asia, Philippines being an Asian country. Come Christmas time, I will return to Philippines and relaunch from Luzon Island toward Vietnam across the South China Sea and continue on my journey due west uh, on my way to Portugal, then row across the Atlantic Ocean to Guyanas, and then continue from there to Aconcagua and return to where I started eventually. That's the plan for now.
That's spectacular. And before we close, what is a typical arrival like? You recently arrived in the
Um,
Philippines, huh?
it depends on where I am approaching. If I am approaching an established port and I can line it up just fine, it can be more formal, a bit more structured. But in places like Papua New Guinea, I didn't have that luxury during my circumnavigation between 2007 and 2012. The first big crossing I had to do was the Pacific Ocean from California shores to what ended up at Papua New Guinea waters. So when I approached Finch Harbor in Papua New Guinea in January of 2009, I had local villagers come out and greet me at sea. Uh, this is Pastor Moses and his son approaching me in their dugout canoes, wondering if
Oh,
I needed help. And so they accompanied me all the way to Finch Harbor, and I could see villagers running along the beach all the way to the pier where I tied up. And then I had a wall of humanity watching what I was doing on the boat.
oh, that's
until, until their
spectacular.
until their curiosity was satisfied. And eventually, of course, they had to go attend to their fields. In these are farmers.
Mhm.
They have to tend to their fields, and they would come and watch in the morning and then take off. eventually the men had their curiosity satisfied, and then it was the kids and grandmothers that were hanging out by my boat. I found that if I spent time on the boat, they were watching me right next to the boat at the pier. If I left my boat, they dispersed. So if I left my boat to the shade of a tree nearby and started journaling, I could disperse the crowd a bit. So I had some way of controlling the crowd, the size of the crowd.
Oh,
Eventually, I became part of the fabric of the community, and they started bringing me soup and such, and I pulled out any offerings that I may have had, giving it to kids. And so it was a wonderful experience. When I reached Legazpi in March 2022 on this last crossing, I had to come into port under guard. A Coast Guard vessel came out and guided me to where I was supposed to come ashore. They had already set up a tent, and their health department was waiting to check my vaccination documents. And the gendarme had come. 4 guards surrounded me and marched me over to this tent where they had the customs people, immigration people, and the health department people. So first, the health department had to make sure I had my vaccinations in place, and then they handled my, customs-related stuff, and made sure that I was, had a current passport and so forth. I had to swim the last 20 feet or so to shore and tossed in dry bags my change of clothes and then towel and a bottle of water at the very left of the image. You can see I had tossed ashore. So I used that to rinse myself and change into dry clothes before we could do any other processing. So I tied up at this beautiful port in Legazpi among the banca boats. These are trimarans, essentially, that they use for fishing, long boats with bamboo floats on either side. And that's typical Philippine vessel used for fishing in the area. So Legazpi is located at the very west end of Albay Gulf. It's home to whale sharks, and these docile creatures swim in an unacceptable amount of plastic trash, and they are feeders that they just open their mouths and scoop up everything in their paths, from algae to small fish or crustaceans, but they also pick up a lot of plastic. So I just don't know how they manage with all that plastic in their system. It's a beautiful location otherwise. I would certainly recommend Legazpi for a visit. That's Mount Leon, an active volcano in the background.
It's absolutely stunning. And
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing your adventures of life at sea and giving us a bit of a glimpse of you and your friends at sea. So thank you so much for joining me today, Erden, and thanks to everyone for tuning in. If you enjoyed the conversation, please give us a like and follow us, and I hope to see you again for another short wave with a lasting impact by Erden. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.